In the center of New York, two monsters are using all weapons available to cause damage to each other. In the face of the powerful self-healing ability, the head that was smashed by a car one moment returned to its original shape and was injured the next. After recovering and being injured again, the situation seemed to have come to a standstill. But anyone with a discerning eye can see that although he often fights back, Hulk is much worse than Abomination in terms of strength and speed. As Abomination becomes more and more violent, Hulk is obviously at a disadvantage. Although Hulk is difficult to being killed, but Banner is different. If it continues to be consumed like this, Hulk may not be able to bear it and transform back into Banner, in which case he will be crushed by hatred in an instant. Tony Stark, didn't you leave? Elbert, who was watching the live blockbuster with great interest, accidentally discovered Tony hiding aside. Several bodyguards protected him in the corner and moved slowly towards the cafe, afraid of attracting the attention of the two monsters. I shouldn't have come here today. After finally entering the cafe, Tony slumped down on the chair with relief and poured himself a cup of coffee to calm down his shock. At the same time, he said with a scared look on his face, "Who knows, these two monsters come out of nowhere." He left with his front foot, and Abomination came out with his back foot to block the road. Finally, the missiles ordered by Ross to be launched attracted Abomination's attention. As a result, Hulk also ran out, and the two monsters just sandwiched Tony and his bodyguards between them. Both guys were only interested in each other, so Tony didn't get slapped to death. Contrary to your point of view, I am very glad to be here today, otherwise I would have missed this live show. Elbert pointed at Abomination and Hulk, who were fighting each other, and saw Abomination punch Hulk hard. On the side of his face, green blood flowed from Hulk's mouth, which slightly distorted his expression. The balance of his body was forcibly broken, causing him to stumble backwards, followed by the hatred of an elite soldier. He pressed on him mercilessly, and for a while Hulk could only lie on the ground and get beaten. "Oh, your idea is really crazy. If the two of them fight more fiercely, your life will be in danger." Tony was speechless. Although he liked the excitement, he liked this kind of excitement even more. He was willing to stay in the villa and watch remotely through Jarvis, instead of risking being trampled to death at any time by staying so close. However, I have to say that Tony also has a death-defying instinct. So watching two people at such a close distance, the possibility of a monster killing them in hand-to-hand combat at any time also stimulated his nerves. As he spoke, his words also changed to, "But I have to admit, this is indeed very exciting. The lowest block is very powerful, and he also knows how to use it. He doesn't look like a monster, but a giant who is proficient in fighting. Did he escape from the laboratory? So you think he will win?" Looking at Abomination, who pushed Hulk to the ground and beat him violently, Elbert did some calculations. In a frontal attack, how many desperate warriors would be needed to defeat Abomination? But the result was not ideal without using tactics. In this case, the extremist warriors need to pay considerable casualties to subdue the Abomination. No matter how you say it, extremist is still in the category of human strengthening. Although the extremist warriors sometimes do not look like humans, their essence has not changed. However, Hulk and Abomination are already complete monsters. With the current development level of extremists, it's hard to catch up. Isn't it obvious? In terms of strength, speed, and even size, he has an absolute advantage. I don't think that green guy has any chance of winning. In this exciting atmosphere, Tony Stark seemed to have forgotten his previous decadence. His expression also returned to calmness, and he said with a definitely look on his face, "But Hulk has resilience. Far more than Abomination's resilience. If you look carefully, he has been attacked for such a long time, and his injuries have not shown any tendency to worsen. But on the other hand, when looking at Abomination, even though Hulk's counterattack was a little weak compared to the beginning, but his recovery speed has begun to slow down, you should be able to understand what this means." Elbert saw it more clearly than Tony. Hulk suffered 2 or 3 times more damage than Abomination, but now Hulk was beaten. The injury is the same as that of Abomination. In the absence of absolute suppressive power, whoever has higher toughness will be more likely to win the final victory. Can Abomination kill Hulk instantly? There is no hope. Abomination and Hulk? Do you know the origins of these two monsters? Tony's eyes flashed. He didn't care too much about the outcome of the two monsters, but he was more interested in their origins. Listening to Elbert's words, does he know the cause and effect? Hulk, formerly known as Bruce Banner, is an outstanding physicist. In an experimental accident, he was hit by gamma rays, which caused him to produce some kind of mutation. Once his mood fluctuated violently, after the heart rate exceeds a threshold, he will become like this. As time went by, Hulk's eyes began to turn red, and rage began to burn in his heart. But there was no trace of hatred immersed in the pleasure of defeating Hulk. Not noticing this change, as for Abomination, he is a special soldier injected with Hulk serum. Unfortunately, it seems that his ability is still not as good as Hulk. Bang! As Elbert's introduction ended, Hulk's anger completely exploded. The power that was originally inferior to Abomination also became extremely powerful in an instant. Abomination's fist was easily blocked by him, and then it was like garbage. Abomination was thrown hard and hit a bunch of paralyzed vehicles. Wow, what a great reversal. The green guys suddenly became stronger, and with such power. Tony looked at the suddenly brave Hulk, secretly calculating the comparison of the steel battle suit and his combat power, and found that no matter what, it seems that no weapon can cause effective damage to him. If the distance is too close, he may even be directly blasted by Hulk. Maybe I should develop a weapon specifically to deal with this situation. The burst of anger made Hulk stronger, but Abomination lost its previous power and was beaten away. His ability is much more stable than Hulk. Although it is stronger than the normal Hulk, it does not have the anger of Hulk. His ability was getting stronger and stronger, and he was defeated like a mountain. From the first time he retreated, he never had a chance to win. The battle was coming to an end, but Elbert's attention was no longer on them. Just now, TIE particles jumped with a very slight movement, and then he felt something similar to TIE particles not far away. Something exists. At the same time, 2 intersections away from the street where the battle took place, a burly man, with the cover of 2 companions, bypassed the police who had set up a cordon and approached the center of the battlefield from the other side. The strong man held a black crystal in his hand, with 2 red dots visible. As he got closer and closer to the center of the battlefield, the distance between the red dots also shortened. This should be some kind of crystal used for search. Radar instrument. I found it, I finally found it. TIE particles are nearby. Standing at the intersection, the strong man stared at the cafe opposite. According to the distance between the red dots, TIE particles were inside, which made the strong man extremely excited. So, although a few months was not long, the pressure of carrying the hope of the entire group made Agram exhausted mentally and physically, but everything was worth it, as long as he got the TIE particles back. Just when Agram was excited to rush over and take back the TIE particles, a huge khaki figure flew towards him at high speed. Agram was completely focused on the cafe, and he was hated without any precautions. It hit the center, and the 2 of them rolled into a ball and crashed into the building next to them. Hey, did I just see that guy named Abomination hit someone? Tony frowned. Although he didn't become Iron Man, watching innocent people being killed still made him feel a little uncomfortable. Sometimes out of sight is a good saying. The weapons invented by Tony have killed countless people, but as long as you don't see the horror with your own eyes, you can pretend that nothing happened. No, he hit an equally dangerous monster. Elbert grinned. Things were getting more and more interesting. Unlike Tony, who only saw a figure, under his terrifying dynamic vision, he saw a person. The moment he was hit by the Abomination, his figure suddenly swelled, and a layer of horny armor emerged on the surface of his body. Judging from the reaction of the TIE particles, the opponent should be its former owner, a cursed warrior of the Dark Elves. This kind of super strong soldier, distorted by the power of TIE particles reality, can even completely defeat Thor at this stage. Although we don't know why the Dark Elves appear here, there is no doubt that there will be a good show next. How is it possible? That was clearly a. Tony didn't believe it and pointed at the wall with a big hole on the opposite side. However, before he could finish speaking, Abomination was thrown out of it at a faster speed, and a body was thrown out of it. A strong man in armor walked out of it, forcing Tony to take back his words and looked at Agram dumbfounded. Forget the 2 monsters before. What's going on with this guy? Actually scarier than a monster. Do you really want to die, Ant? Agram stepped on Abomination's back. Huge amounts of power directly cracked Abomination's skin, and the blood flowed wildly. First he was ravaged by Hulk, and now he met Agram. Reem, the life of hatred seems to have come to an end. Roar. However, Hulk, who has been controlled by anger, does not care whether the person standing in front of him is Abomination or Agram. He just wants to destroy everything in front of him, and destroy all existences standing on the ground. Agram standing on the abomination was too conspicuous, so Hulk pounced on him without hesitation. Bang! Feeling Hulk's attack, Agram decisively gave up his dying hatred, raised his arms and turned around to collide with Hulk. The two pairs of arms with an obvious gap in file size collided hard. At the same time, however, the result of the wrestling was surprising. What's going on? Where did this monster come from? Does the military have any research projects in this area? Those damn lunatics. Nick Fury, who was remotely controlled from the space carrier, saw Agram confronting Hulk. After this scene, he suddenly felt more pressure. He had already learned about the hateful situation from the controlled rows, but where did this guy wearing ancient armor come from? Director, I think this has nothing to do with the military's research. The results of remote scanning show that the material on the opponent's armor does not belong to Blue Star. An agent responsible for on-site analysis said with disbelief on his face. At the same time, it also attracted the attention of other colleagues. Aliens? Or is it just alien technology? Nick Fury projected the analysis map onto his computer. Sure enough, the results displayed above showed that only about 20% of the materials making up the armor overlapped with known materials. This is not something on Blue Star. After contacting Asgard, Nick Fury will not deny the existence of aliens. But are all aliens so terrifying? One Asgard is enough. After all, it still exists in human mythology, and there is evidence to follow. But the guys who have come out now can actually fight Hulk and have the upper hand. If this is the case with other races in the universe, then Nick Fury can think about how to keep Blue Star as low-key as it should be. I'm sorry, Director, I can't answer your question. Although the armor looks very primitive, like a product of the cold weapon era, it actually contains a lot of high-tech crystallization. It is difficult for our technology to penetrate remotely. All light signals they all disappeared after touching the surface of the armor. The agent who discovered the problem before smiled bitterly. After the initial test, the opponent's armor directly blocked all similar signals, and they were unable to obtain any information. Continue to monitor the battle and record all data. Nick Fury did not embarrass the agent. After all, it was a gap in hard power. Even if the agent could be super powerful, the technology could not keep up, so he just issued an order to continue monitoring. The opponent's intentions are currently unclear. Whether they are enemies or friends can only be known after contact. Now, let Hulk help them test how strong the opponent is. I didn't expect that the weak Midgard could have a warrior like you. Surrender, I will give you a chance to share the glory with us. Once again repelling Hulk's charge, Agram said to Hulk with some admiration said, Hulk's strength was beyond his imagination, and his growth rate was extremely alarming. At first, he only had some strength, but no threat. However, now, with some trembling arms, Agram had to pay attention to Hulk. Come. He didn't know what the upper limit of the guy in front of him was, but he couldn't continue to be entangled like this. Type particles were here. How could he waste time in a meaningless fight with Hulk? Roar. However, the only answer to Agram was Hulk's furious roar. Then Hulk, whose strength became stronger again, rushed forward relentlessly, forcing Agram to wrestle with him again. This time Agram's heart sank completely. Hulk's power was already close to his level. If this continued, he might lose. No, it's impossible. I'm the strongest, how could I lose? Carrying the future of the Dark Elves, Agram pushed Hulk away, but this had no effect. As long as the anger did not subside, Hulk the power will continue to grow. Maybe there is a limit, but before it reaches this line, Agram has been torn apart. Director, the alien visitor mentioned a term, Midgard. The agents monitoring the battle are very good at grasping the key points. Because of the Thor incident, basically all agents were forced to read Nordic myths. They knew the name Midgard, which is synonymous with the world of Midgard. The other party may be related to Norse mythology. Midgard. There are 9 realms in Norse mythology, and Midgard is the world of Midgard, where humans live. Today's Blue Star. Nick Fury is not sure whether this name is unique to the Norse mythology system, or whether it is a common name for Blue Star in the universe, passed down by Asgard, a powerful civilization. But at least it can explain that the other party did not appear out of thin air, and may have something to do with Asgard, over contact. But Nick Fury had a hunch that Asgard definitely knew the guy who fought with Hulk. Nick Fury didn't like this unreasonable feeling. He didn't like anything that was beyond his control, but this happened more and more recently. He knocked the edge of the table, staring at the corner of the drawer. Maybe it's time to start him. Director, the alien visitor was suppressed by Hulk. He may lose. The agent's voice woke Nick Fury out of his thoughts. He hurriedly looked at the surveillance screen, which showed Hulk holding Agram on the street. Make 2 deep marks. No matter how strong your will is, you can't reverse the absolute gap in strength. If you are facing a wall-mounted wall hanging like Hulk, unless you overwhelm it with absolute power from the beginning, like Thanos, you can beat him to the ground with 1 punch. Otherwise you will be delayed. If you go down, you will only be crushed in reverse. Be prepared to take coercive measures. We can't let him die here before we figure out the opponent's intentions. Nick Fury responded quickly. No matter what, Agram cannot be killed by Hulk. The lessons from the Sarajevo incident that triggered the incident are still fresh in my mind. If Agram is an important alien figure, an interstellar war may break out. Blue Star is not yet ready for this. Damn it, you can't fall here. Squeezing out the last bit of strength in his body, Agram struggled to resist Hulk's attack. But luckily Hope appeared, and 2 of his subordinates accompanied him to Blue Star. Arriving at the scene and seeing the 2 of them, Agram immediately shouted, "Don't come over, inform the leader, TIE particles are here, let the battleships attack." What did he say? Nick Fury stared at Agram with wide eyes on the space carrier. At this moment, he regretted his previous decision. He shouldn't just wait and see what happened. He should kill Agram directly. How nice. He said, "Let the battleships attack." The agent on the side was frightened by Nick Fury's terrifying face, but his heart was shattered. Isn't this a small scene of the military rounding up experimental subjects? Why did the fight turn directly into an interstellar war? I don't need you to repeat it, Nick Fury roared loudly to vent his emotions. He knew that he had to calm down. No matter how bad the situation was, S.H.I.E.L.D. was Blue Star's first line of defense and he must not collapse. Contact the Security Council, upload all intelligence, and completely evacuate New York citizens. War is coming. After saying that, Nick Fury ignored the busy agent and returned to his office alone. He took out a copper plate that looked quite old from the drawer and put it on his forehead. After a while, a unique feeling of dizziness came, which made Nick Fury's anxious mood slightly relaxed. At least he was not alone now, and this ally was quite powerful. As the sense of chaos disappeared, Nick Fury's figure left the space carrier and arrived at a mysterious place. There is no specific concept of direction here, and various substances called darkness are flowing here. He stood at the corner of a huge rock, and on the other side of the rock was the Ancient One in white robes. Ancient One magician. Where is this place? Different from the holy place he met before, Nick Fury's sharp intuition told him that this place is dangerous, very dangerous. Even the Ancient One exudes the same fatal danger. It is even suspected that the Ancient One will chop off his own head with a magic blade at the next moment. This is the boundary between the Dark Dimension and Blue Star. Dormammu has been somewhat active recently, so I had to appear here to stop him to prevent him from doing anything bad to Blue Star. Darkness appeared in Ancient One's eyes, the streamer. This Ancient One is very weird. But Nick Fury can't control that much. Now Blue Star may face a devastating crisis at any time. Dark Dimension? Forget it. I don't know much about you magicians, but you have to come with me now. Blue Star is facing huge amounts of threats now, and we need you. Looking at the boundary formed by boundless darkness, Nick Fury subconsciously didn't want to understand what this meant, and he didn't have much time to understand it. I already know what happened in New York. Although I can't leave here for the time being, my consciousness is still wandering outside. Ancient One nodded, indicating that she knew the crisis. Nick Fury said, but she did not think it was impossible. The problem to solve, they are dark elves, who once dominated the universe, but thousands of years ago, they were defeated by the Asgard army led by the father of God King Odin. And now their only remaining members awaken from the darkness, in order to restore the darkness. Glory, they want to take back TIE particles. Dark elf? TIE particles? What is that thing? I heard that guy shout out this term. Why is that thing in New York? Seeing that the Ancient One knew the whole story and was not in a hurry to chat with him, Nick Fury he also relaxed a little. At least this showed that the matter was not as serious as he thought. However, TIE particles caught his attention. It can be regarded as a treasure by such a civilization. If he gets it, Blue Star will become how's the success. TIE particles are a magical substance that can help the Dark Elves realize their desire to render the universe with darkness. It is equivalent to the Tesseract you collected. It can bring power and disaster. It seems to have seen through Nick Fury's thoughts. The Ancient One chanted softly, but then returned to his normal tone and continued, "A few months ago, Elbert took the TIE particles from the seal of Asgard." "What? Why didn't you tell me this?" Upon hearing this familiar name, Nick Fury jumped up instantly. There were already enough troubles, but why did it become more troublesome? "Because this is beyond what you can handle." The Ancient One glanced at Nick Fury. His natural arrogance made Nick Fury calm down instantly. Seeing this, the Ancient One nodded with satisfaction and continued. "The God King Odin faction, the envoy brought the casket of ancient winters to stop him from taking away the TIE particles, but if I hadn't taken action in time, the envoy would have died in Elbert's hands." How strong is that messenger? Nick Fury is still unwilling to give up. He wants to do more, and for this he needs to recruit some more powerful beings. Whether they are good people or guys walking on the edge of danger. People who can be won over, even if they are pure villains, have their use value. Stronger than Thor. The Ancient One directly rejected Nick Fury's idea. Elbert's power was terrifying enough, and he would never jump into the hole he dug like Thor. Nick Fury was silent, but it was not so easy for him to give up. As long as he was still on the Blue Star, no matter who he was, Nick Fury would dare to give it a try. In the face of the unknown final crisis, there was nothing else he could not try. Woolen cloth? Then how should we solve this problem? If you can't take action, at least send your disciples to help. We lack experience in fighting the Dark Elves. Nick Fury understood that TIE particles were in Elbert's hands. This battle must be fought, and even the Ancient One was warning her about Elbert's power, which only meant one thing. In her opinion, the entire Dark Elves were not as dangerous as one Elbert. They also have no experience fighting the Dark Elves. After their defeat thousands of years ago, there was no news of the Dark Elves in the entire universe. The Ancient One rejected Nick Fury's proposal. The existence of the magicians should not be exposed to everyone now. In human eyes, at least not before the real desperate situation comes. The Dark Elves were defeated miserably that year, and only the flagship of the entire civilization survived. This is an opportunity for you, a good opportunity to strengthen the power of Blue Star. Only one flagship left? Nick Fury was stunned for a moment, and then fell into thinking. He originally thought that since the Dark Elves could dominate the universe, even if they were defeated, they would still have quite a powerful force, at least powerful enough for Blue Star. But I didn't expect that there was only one flagship left, which is worth considering. Don't be careless. Even if there is only one flagship left, the Dark Elves are still very powerful in combat. With the weapons you currently have, it will be difficult to defeat them. You need a helper. Ancient One drew a circle in the air with his right hand, and a secondary image appeared in Nick Fury's eyes. It was a huge amount of black cross. As the indicator light on it lit up, he realized that it was actually an unknown battleship, and it was right next to the Blue Star. Though the system didn't notice it at all. Before Nick Fury's face turned ugly, Ancient One drew another circle in midair, and another picture appeared. This was a cafe on the street in New York. A huge green figure flashed past, indicating that Hulk was nearby. But Hulk can no longer attract Nick Fury's attention. What he cares about are the two people in the cafe, Elbert and Tony Stark. Whoever creates the problem must solve it. Go to Elbert and tell him that my patience has its limits and it's time for him to solve the problem. The picture finally settled on Elbert's face, which was a bit too young. He has a beautiful face, but what he has done is something that others may not be able to do in their lifetime. Wait. Feeling the familiar sense of chaos return, Nick Fury knew he was leaving here, but he still had some questions to ask. But Ancient One no longer gave him time. With a final glimpse, Nick Fury shockingly, he discovered that at some point, a blurry black shadow appeared where he was standing just now, but it made him stand incomparably. That is Dormammu. What kind of terrifying existence are Ancient One and the others facing? The next moment, Nick Fury, who returned to the space carrier, thought of the black shadow with lingering fear, and his body was still shaking uncontrollably. He once again had a clear understanding of the power of Ancient One, which strengthened his confidence. Although there were many troubles, there were also many friends who could solve them. Thinking of this, Nick Fury put the copper plate back in its place, pulled out another document, and turned over one of the pages. Elbert's photo appeared on it, There are no eternal enemies in this world. Now is the time for us to become friends. In the universe outside the blue star, Agram's message was successfully transmitted to Malekith. Seeing the TIE particle signal flashing again, Malekith excitedly waved his arms and directly ordered the battleship to head towards the blue star. As long as after taking back the TIE particles, this universe is dark after all. Oh my god, what is that? Is that a spaceship? Aliens really exist? Is this going to start a cosmic war? What happened? Malekith's invasion was not concealed at all. In his opinion, the sooner the TIE particles were recaptured, the more important it was. Otherwise, once Asgard intervened, things would become troublesome. Therefore, after entering the atmosphere, the battleship had no intention of slowing down at all. Smashed into the center of New York City, causing citizens who had not had time to evacuate to scream in disbelief. Damn it! Why did it come so fast? Nick Fury walked out of the office and looked at the huge battleship that had landed in New York. He cursed secretly and quickly asked the agent beside him, "How are the evacuation arrangements for New York citizens?" "The evacuation has begun, but it was too short. There are still quite a lot of citizens in New York City." The busy agent raised his head and answered Nick Fury's question, and quickly continued to coordinate various evacuation intersections. "I can't wait any longer. You continue to coordinate the command and pick up Natasha Romanoff for me." After estimating the evacuation speed, Nick Fury knew very well that they had no chance to completely evacuate everyone, so they could only find a way to deal with the enemy quickly. "Director, have you seen the Black Cross in the city center?" As soon as the communication was connected, Natasha Romanoff's slightly surprised voice came over, but Nick Fury didn't have time to explain it to her and said directly, "It seems that you are nearby, which is good. I will give you an address, go find Elbert and bring me some words to him." "Elbert? Okay, director." Natasha Romanoff was stunned for a moment, but she still carried out the order and began to move quickly towards the location given by Nick Fury. The cars blocking the way did not affect her speed at all, but when she arrived when the target was near, he couldn't help but cursed, "Shit." In front of her eyes, the battle between Hulk and Agram was coming to an end. The power brought by anger began to fade, but it was still enough for Hulk to easily tear apart Agram's armor, revealing that the inner part was completely different from that of an ordinary dark elf. Different skin, his entire body has turned black due to the cursed stone, and the exposed skin is like charcoal, shattering under Hulk's huge force. Big guy, I don't mean any harm. Can we sit down and calm down for a while?" Looking at Hulk, who was turning to look at him after cleaning up Agram, Natasha Romanoff's heartbeat was beating very fast. Her beauty was enough to make most of the men paused in their movements, but this was definitely not including the monster Hulk. Roar! Hulk with blood-red eyes completely ignored Natasha Romanoff's words. He bulged up his massive muscles and was about to jump over to kill the little bug. Natasha Romanoff looked nervous and took out a special pistol, but next for a second, like a balloon punctured by a needle, Hulk shrank. Hulk's anger has no limit, but Banner's physical strength is not that sufficient. First he fought against Abomination, and then against Agram. He relied on his anger to hold on. Now Agram fell, half of his anger was gone, and he unable to maintain Hulk's form, he transformed back into Bruce Banner. Phew! Natasha Romanoff patted her chest subconsciously, and connected to Nick Fury's signal with a sigh of relief. Hulk has turned back into Dr. Banner. I suggest that he recover it as soon as possible to avoid any accidents. This does not look like a safe place. After saying that, Natasha Romanoff continued to walk towards her previous destination. What surprised her was that there was such an undamaged cafe in a messy street. It looked a little wrong, but when she thought of Nick Fury's mission, Natasha Romanoff bit the bullet and walked in. Elbert? There was only one person in the entire cafe. By comparing his back, Natasha Romanoff confirmed the other person's identity, but the strange silence around her made her a little nervous. This quiet atmosphere was too strange, not like tranquility, it's more like dead silence. Natasha Romanoff, a 7th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I didn't know you came here to see me. Why do you want me? As Elbert turned around and spoke, the feeling of silence that seemed to be strangling his throat finally dissipated, and Natasha Romanoff felt the urge to gasp. But the agent's instinct prevented her body from reacting, and she forced herself to calm down and said, "The director asked me to bring you a message." "Oh, would you like to hear more about it?" Elbert shrugged and motioned for Natasha Romanoff to continue. He admitted that the beauty in front of him was very beautiful, but also very dangerous. It was not a physical danger, but a personality, more secret danger. Easily if you get close, you will be covered in bruises. The Ancient One magician said. Natasha Romanoff paused. She didn't quite understand why Nick Fury asked her to add this name, but seeing Elbert's expression change, she felt that there was no problem with this request. My patience, there is a limit, and it's time for you to solve the problem. I see, I understand. Elbert nodded, and some doubts were finally solved, such as why her attitude was unexpectedly tough when she first met Ancient One. Think about it, Ancient One and Nick, the probability of Fury collaborating is almost 100%. It is not difficult to understand that the two of them colluded. As for the solution to the problem, Ancient One said, Elbert looked up and looked out the window. A large number of sickle-shaped small spaceships were constantly projected on the Black Cross battleship. The Dark Elves were really coming out in full force. Who creates problems and who solves them? Ancient One obviously didn't want to take the blame for Elbert, so he asked Nick Fury to throw the problem over, but Elbert couldn't help but answer it. Who made him still on the Blue Star? Ancient One didn't. If he takes the blame, the Dark Elves can chase him to death, but who wants him to hold TIE particles now? It was not that Elbert had never thought about taking the Dark Elves around the world to make things bigger, but unfortunately, a mere Dark Elf was not even qualified to make a gun, so he had to let them die directly. It's time to stretch your muscles, Dark Elf. This opponent can barely fight a dozen. Elbert stood up and picked up the files on the table. Natasha Romanoff vaguely saw a Stark Industries logo in surprise. But before she could see clearly, the document disappeared. And then Elbert's figure also disappeared from her eyes. Superman type? Teleportation? Natasha Romanoff raised an eyebrow. The news that Elbert is suspected of being Superman is not a secret among the top management of S.H.I.E.L.D. After Phil Coulson met Elbert for the first time, he was pulled for a week of psychological recovery. But seeing this scene with her own eyes, which was beyond her comprehension, still surprised her. Buzz, however, the next second, the surprised expression solidified on Natasha Romanoff's face, like thousands of bees suddenly buzzing in her ears. For a moment, Natasha Romanoff felt that her consciousness left her body and collapsed weakly. On the ground, she was finally able to breathe heavily this time. Natasha Romanoff's sight when she fell happened to be aimed at the clock on the wall. The second hand reached the 12 position accurately, indicating that it had completed the last second of the minute. But if Natasha Romanoff glanced at the clock when she entered the door, she would be able to. It was discovered that there was only a tiny gap between the second hand and the 12 mark at that time. Director, he's out. The agent who had been monitoring the cafe immediately reported Elbert's whereabouts to Nick Fury. Watching him walking towards the direction of the black battleship, Nick Fury breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that Ancient One's words were still valid. It worked, but after waiting for a while, when no second figure appeared on the screen, Nick Fury's heart suddenly twitched. Wait, where is Natasha Romanoff? Natasha Romanoff's life signal is good, and the positioning shows that she is still in the cafe. A steady voice came from behind. Nick Fury suddenly felt a little relieved, but still a little uneasy, and said to the owner of the voice, Barton, you take people to see it personally to ensure Natasha Romanoff's safety. Hawkeye nodded and quickly left the command room. He showed no concern for Natasha Romanoff and left the space carrier with several agent-style fighters. Seeing this, Nick Fury looked at the screen with relief. He wanted to look at how Elbert dealt with the Dark Elves. Can he really have such terrible destructive power? However, when Nick Fury turned his head, the first thing he saw was the agent with a dull face. When his eyes focused on the screen, his expression also became dull. In just a few seconds when he and Hawkeye communicated, everything, the Sickle Fighter and the Black Cross flagship, were completely scrapped and broken, and the Cambridge was drooping in the air and groaning under the weight. What just happened? Where is Elbert? Who did this? Nick Fury was shocked and checked the clock. He indeed only communicated with Hawkeye for a few seconds. What happened here? No, I don't know, Director. We only saw a red shadow, and then it became like this. Being awakened by Nick Fury's roar, the agent quickly said truthfully, and he didn't see anything either. Slow down the playback speed of the video. The slower the better. In an instant, Nick Fury thought of the key. Since something did happen, it should be recorded, but when the video was taken out separately, slowed down to the extreme, and could only see the red shadows all over the sky, the constantly crashing Sickle fighter jets, and a final frozen scene. Albert was wearing blood-red armor transformed from type particles, and was stepping on a surfboard made of the same material. He drew a weird smile in the direction of the camera. I don't know why, but seeing such a picture, Nick Fury sneered for no reason. Chill. It's really not challenging. I originally thought they could give me some surprises. In a high-rise building in New York City, Albert looked at his masterpiece with a little disappointment. Sometimes being too strong is not a good thing. It makes him feel bored. Maybe it's time to challenge Ancient One and Odin. Although there may be dangers, the rewards will definitely far outweigh the dangers. In terms of ability, the Dark Elves are actually not weak, but most of their technology is derived from type particles. Using these things to attack Albert is just a joke, so he basically just runs around and wraps around his body. The Speed Force has completely destroyed everything around it. Let me do the math: Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and the Captain of the United States. Well, the people are all here, and it's time for me to speed up. I believe this plan will definitely make people's eyes shine. When it starts to be executed, the whole world will change. Looking at the battleship among the embers of the fire, Albert showed a big smile. Just like the battleship, this world cannot escape destruction. An attack from extraterrestrials ended in such an anticlimactic manner. Among the citizens who had not yet evacuated at that time, many people claimed that they saw a vague shadow frantically massacring those alien warships. But this sound was soon replaced by the suppression continued. And I have to say that when it came to dividing the spoils, the bald eagle's movements were extremely fast. Before other countries proposed joint research, the entire battlefield had been cleaned up, and only a few of the towering warships were left. A piece of symbolic debris fell into the pit. Time is the medicine that heals all wounds. With the efforts of S.H.I.E.L.D., the citizens of New York returned to normal life after a period of time. Strictly speaking, they did not suffer much harm. The Dark Elves were eliminated by Albert not long after they appeared. As a result, the person who caused the greatest loss was Abomination, who had completely expired. Here General Ross has to thank the Dark Elves. With their intervention, the entire America leadership is now discussing how to deal with the remaining warships. They have no intention of paying attention to the harm he caused before. As long as they wait for this wave of limelight to pass, Abomination, the incident will be handled coldly, and the punishment he receives can be easily settled through the network of relationships, which is gratifying and gratifying. After the whole incident was over, Nick Fury was probably the one who was in the worst mood. Although Albert did not kill Natasha Romanoff, the time cage built for experimental purposes still caused considerable damage to Natasha Romanoff, at least for a period of time. Must rest. Nick Fury understands that this is Albert's warning. The Ancient One can threaten him, but if Nick Fury can't do it, I'm afraid the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. will be wiped out if it happens again. After seeing how Albert dealt with the Dark Elves, Nick Fury knows very well about S.H.I.E.L.D. There is no way to restrain Albert. Is this the power of type particles? Or something else? No matter what it is, we have to have a response plan. Nick Fury left the space carrier and came to a secret underground space, where S.H.I.E.L.D. was first established. It was built under Howard's planning, and only a handful of people in the world know about it. Nick Fury passed the security inspection and reached the deepest part of the underground space. He opened a password box protected by bushes and found a blue cube lying inside, quietly exuding a mysterious aura. The 223rd trial of human strength hormone begins. In the newly built Science and Technology Park of Osborne Industrial, Harry calmly gave the order to start the experiment. 2 years have changed a lot in him. If anything, when Albert saw Harry, he was just a child, but now Harry is majestic and handsome, and the confidence brought by knowledge and success makes him look radiant. It seems that you are very confident, Harry. On the other side of the experimental table, Albert looked at Harry kindly. His growth has indeed exceeded Albert's expectations. If it was the beginning of the experiment, Harry would only rely on inexplicable good luck to overcome it. However, Harry is now fully qualified to take charge of his own business. Perhaps compared to his father Norman, Harry is still not experienced enough, but in terms of research on human body strength hormones, he has completely surpassed Norman. The experiments have been carried out many times, Uncle Albert. I can definitely confirm the results. 2 years of continuous research have made Harry look a little thin, but if anyone dares to underestimate him, he will have to pay the price. Although now he still has the experiment was being carried out, but as early as half a year ago, Harry injected himself with human strength hormone, and the effect was perfect. Compared with other experimental subjects, human strength hormone seemed to be created for the Osborn family. In terms of physical fitness alone, Harry even had possibly suppressing the United States captain. Today is the last experiment. If there are no problems, it will be officially put into production. Your father's last wish has been fulfilled. What do you want to do next? The completion of human strength hormone is a good thing for Harry. Is also a bad thing. He is still very young, but the goal he has worked for his whole life has disappeared. I don't know. Hearing Albert's question, Harry didn't know how to answer. Now he was very confused. He had never thought about pursuing the end of science and developing various magical creations. Just to fulfill Norman's last wish. Now everything was coming to an end, and Harry suddenly felt that he had lost the meaning of life. How about I give you a suggestion? Seeing Harry's confused expression, Albert took out an envelope with money and handed it to Harry as expected. State University of New York. Harry opened the envelope and was stunned for a moment when he looked at the content on it. He looked at Albert in confusion. He didn't think he needed to go to university for further study. Instead of taking those boring courses, he would be more efficient by self-study. It's not about studying, but it's about letting you experience college life, make some friends, or meet a girlfriend, someone who can be with you for a lifetime. Albert explained with a smile that after several years of contact, Albert really regards Harry as a junior. He knows what he will do in the future, but at least before tragedy strikes, let Harry experience a complete life instead of spending his whole life in a laboratory. But Harry still wanted to refuse, but Albert had already stood up and walked out of the laboratory. The results of the experiment were not important to him either. He just came to see Harry, that's all. Good boy reported to me, don't forget, I am your guardian. Seeing this, Harry could only look at the admission notice in his hand with a wry smile, but things were already like this, so let's try to adapt. Albert was right, he had not been in contact with the outside world for too long, and he needed a friend, and the Osborn family cannot die. Boss, I met Tony Stark today. When he walked out of Harry's laboratory, Albert met Raza. Now he is the security captain of the new technology park. He has an above-board identity and is not afraid of anyone checking the root cause. Oh, isn't this great? You are his savior. Albert smiled, but Raza's face became even more miserable. Obviously, the meeting between the two was not as pleasant as Albert said. Stop joking. You don't know what happened back then. Tony Stark has already found out what happened back then, but he doesn't give me a good look. Thinking of Tony's murderous look. Lazar was a little frightened. Even if he was injected extremis, he didn't dare to jump around in front of Tony Stark. That is simply a monster. Every time he captures an image of Tony Stark, it means that his steel battlesuit has been updated. He is not afraid of being seen at all. On the contrary, he is still using these to promote his military power, Zhao. And Raza is obviously the kind of guy who is intimidated. He has found out your background a long time ago. If you want to take action, you will not stand in front of me properly. Where is he now? On Raza's first day at the Science and Technology Park, Stark found out your background. However, this arrogant person didn't say anything, but still accepted Raza's love. Although he didn't look good every time, at least he wouldn't do anything directly. Where is he now? In the Star Laboratory. Raza could only smile bitterly at this. Tony Stark did not want to kill him, but it did not affect him at all. After knowing that Raza had also been injected with extremis, Tony Stark got even worse, annoying Raza. Osborn's new industrial park has not been established for a long time, but the cooperation with Stark Industries has allowed it to grow rapidly. It is already one of the few emerging technology parks in America. Therefore, there are rumors that the chairman of Osborn Industries and Stark Industries, the chairman of the company, has a close relationship. And there was even internal news not long ago that the two exchanged part of the company's shares. For a time, the stocks of both companies began to rise. After all, Stark Industries, needless to say, Osborn Industries is also the leader in the industry. Such a strong alliance will naturally make everyone feel confident about the subsequent development of both parties. However, amidst all the good news, there are still many rumors circulating, saying that the two companies are not as friendly as they appear on the surface, but more like one coercing the other. Unfortunately, this argument was quickly attacked by the big fishing boats. Disappear. Otherwise Albert might ask Raza to treat the guy who made such remarks to a cup of coffee. The two companies were indeed not as harmonious as they appeared. After the Dark Elf invasion that year, Elbert took the opportunity to help Tony Stark 560 treat palladium poisoning and made a huge profit from him. Even the technical support of the Science and Technology Park, they are all provided, free, by Stark. Now he is regarded as the largest shareholder of Stark Industry besides Tony, and is fully qualified to restrain Tony's actions. The superficial harmony is just because of the needs of both parties. Wait, Mr. Stark, according to the chairman's regulations, you do not have permission to enter the main laboratory. As soon as Elbert arrived at the Star Laboratory, he heard the security guard trying to dissuade Tony. He was already used to it. Every time Tony came here, I will always be full of curiosity and want to go in and take a look. It's a pity that Elbert hasn't opened up to that level yet and shares everything with him. The two of them don't wear the same pants. They just maintain their current status as superficial brothers for some of the same purposes. Oh, Elbert, look what your security guard said. I think our friendship has reached a level where we can reveal all our secrets, but what happened today makes me really sad. I still want to talk to you. As soon as Tony, the security guard, said something to himself, he immediately found someone to complain to. However, all he got in return was a blank look from Elbert, who revealed his secret. Then you let me go to your personal laboratory for a tour, but open the core of Jarvis, data. Okay Tony, since you really want to see it, let's come together. Although he was not impressed by Tony's shamelessness, Elbert did not reject his idea of visiting. Firstly, he was too annoyed, and secondly, there are some things that are no longer necessary to hide. Even Elbert hopes that Tony can contribute to his career. With such a useless coolie technician, he can't just let it go. You actually changed your gender? Hee, it seems that your research has been completed. Tony followed with a smile on his face, but he was not as enthusiastic as he expected. He just said with some surprise. He was not a fool. He came here before I came here 5 or 6 times, but Elbert found a reason to send him away every time. Now that he is willing to let him go in, it is probably because some things that should not be seen by him have been dealt with, and the remaining things are. The appeal to Tony is really limited. It's not done yet. If you're interested, you can help. As they spoke, the two of them had passed through several security gates and arrived at the core of the entire Science and Technology, Park, the Star Laboratory. The most eye-catching one was a huge amount of particle accelerator. It is the heart of the entire park. Researching microscopic particles can only be regarded as a side job. It is embedded in a reactor improved by Ivan Vanke and provides energy to the entire park all the time. Although it is indeed inferior in terms of hard technology Tony, but in terms of energy supply alone, Ivan Vanke is doing pretty well. Aren't you afraid that I will steal your technology? Tony patted the outer pipe of the particle accelerator with his hand. He could understand this thing just by looking at it. Although it is not said that it can be copied directly, the core principle is as long as after trying a few times, you will almost be able to come up with a setting. I'm definitely not afraid. I didn't prepare to guard you when I asked you to follow me. And you have taken away a few things from me in the past few years? Elbert looked indifferent to this. In the entire Science and Technology Park, except for the Star Laboratory, there is no other. The entire area was built with the technical support provided by Stark Industries. There are countless back doors left by Tony, and Elbert is too lazy to repair them one by one. If Tony wants to touch the technology, let him touch it. Anyway, he mostly uses it for his steel battle suit. As long as it doesn't spread casually, it's not a big deal. After all, even if Elbert wants to take care of it, he doesn't have any good ideas. With Tony's ability, as long as he knows some of the technologies are out of reach. At most, they can only be used without being fair and honest. Can the hero's affairs be called stealing? Haha. When Tony heard this, he acted stupid decisively and looked around to observe the surrounding environment. There were not many researchers here, but there was an independent cubicle, and there were quite a few people around. Tony leaned over quite naturally, and I saw a group of silver-white substance flowing in the transparent glass cabinet. What is this? One of the hardest materials known in the world, vibranium. Elbert said while looking at the fist-file-sized fluid in the glass cabinet. This thing is indeed too rare, except for Wakanda and a Graham who once stole a part of vibranium from Wakanda. Wow, it's extremely difficult to get this thing anywhere else. Even with the current size of Osborne Industries, even with all their efforts and searching, they can only collect so much in the world. If you want to get more, Wakanda is afraid an unavoidable hurdle. The hardest substance in the world. Tony looked at the vibranium flowing repeatedly in the glass cabinet, somewhat disbelieving it. Looking at the surrounding equipment, the temperature provided was not too high, but it was melted to a fluid state at this level. How will it be the hardest substance? And if there is such a thing, why doesn't he know about it? Do you know the shield of the Captain of the United States? Albert smiled. Not many people knew about vibranium. Its source had been cut off long ago, without relevant information being transmitted, even if Tony had Jarvis. Even if you help collect information, you can't know the existence of vibranium, and what melts vibranium is not the temperature, but something else, a non-physical thing. I definitely know that my father gave it to him, but does that have anything to do with vibranium? Tony frowned. Since the Dark Elf incident, he found that he didn't know more and more things, including himself. What the hell is S.H.I.E.L.D. that Dad once co-founded, and now they're using Howard's name, but it's annoying Tony. The main material of the shield is vibranium. After integrating with other metals in a magical proportion, a brand new material is formed. The American government calls it original adamantium. Speaking of adamantium, the most famous use the first person is definitely Wolverine Logan. Unfortunately, there is no such system as mutant in this world, so X-Men naturally does not exist. However, the alloy of vibranium and adamantium is real. Albert once experimented, using physical attacks with the blessing of the Speed Force to try to destroy a small piece of vibranium, but the result was not ideal. He could destroy it, but the power required was not proportional to the actual effect, and because as of the target amount of vibranium is only a small amount. If there is more, the effect will only be worse. In contrast, directly vibrating atoms with the Speed Force can effectively break the internal stability of vibranium, thereby achieving the effect of causing its creation to collapse. The more stable something is, the more terrifying the impact of changes on it will be. Vibranium's therefore, it has strong defense power precisely because its molecules are relatively static, which makes it hardly conduct heat and kinetic energy. Therefore, all heat and kinetic energy will be swallowed up the moment it comes into contact with vibranium, and once the original structure appears in turmoil, vibranium is no longer vibranium. Oh, it is said that the shield of the Captain of the United States is indestructible, so is it also indestructible? Speaking of the shield of the Captain of the United States, Tony became interested in the material in front of him. If this is really the case, then his steel battlesuit might be there will be a qualitative change. Don't you have Howard's research information? Albert glanced at Tony. It seems that what S.H.I.E.L.D. took over was not only the relics they handed over to Tony, but also more things. Maybe even everything related to cooperation with the government back then. We're all detained. Nothing in this world is indestructible, but at least on the current Blue Star. There are only a handful of things that can destroy vibranium. How much is this thing? I bought it. Tony's face turned slightly green when he mentioned Howard's research information. Apparently he also realized that S.H.I.E.L.D. might have more things in hand, but he couldn't ask for it. Tony didn't want to say anything more on this topic, so he was going to buy vibranium directly. What could be more reliable than the results of his own research? As long as the product is suitable, money is not an issue. $10,000 per gram, a fair price, but if you need a large quantity, I will postpone the delivery. Albert quoted a price that made Tony frown, but he could still afford it. And compared with some other special metals, the price is already very low, but the problem is that a lot of steel battlesuits are used. He is also thinking about upgrading them. How much will it cost to make them one by one? Is there any artificial synthesis technology? Or is it produced somewhere? I can spend more money to buy information. If you do something, you can only be eaten. If you want to get real benefits, you have to find out the source. Tony doesn't want to buy retail products honestly, he wants to directly monopolize the source. There is no artificial technology, at least I don't, but I can tell you the place of production, but as a friendly reminder, it's best not to think about it. Albert smiled slightly, but looking at Tony's indifferent expression, he knew that even if Albert said that vibranium could only be produced in the White House, and he didn't care, so Albert took Tony directly to a world map. In the east-central part of the African continent, there is a country called Wakanda. The meteorite composed of vibranium many years ago it fell there, and they also benefited from it, but in order to ensure that vibranium would not be abused by others, the king of Wakanda chose to close the truth and disguise his country as a backward land, but in fact they are the most developed on the Blue Star. The country is at least half a century ahead of contemporary times. Wakanda? The most developed country? Are you kidding me? If people say that the most developed country in the world is in Africa, they will be regarded as crazy. Tony frowned and looked at Wakanda marked on the map. His face there was obvious disbelief in the interview, but Albert was by no means the kind of person who talked nonsense. Is it possible that there really is a technologically advanced country on the declining African continent? Can you go and verify it yourself? I still have some things to deal with today. It's time for us to leave. Regarding Tony's doubts, Albert did not give a clear explanation. Since Tony had questions, he should solve them himself. After that, he left the laboratory directly with Tony, who still wanted to see more. Leaving Tony Stark, who was full of doubts, to leave alone, Albert went to an independent space under the Star Laboratory. There were many similar places in the entire science and technology park, and they were all prepared for some inconvenient things. After all, Osborne Industries is still a biotechnology company. Sometimes it is easy to step on certain bottom lines for research. Although the industry has acquiesced to this problem, it is not easy to expose it. Even Dr. Connors has acquiesced to this. Occasionally, some super-standard experiments will be carried out in the park he is responsible for. The underground space of the Star Laboratory is naturally the largest, and it is also the most strict. It is guaranteed to be guarded by a team of 913 desperate warriors at all times. If you want to sneak in here silently, at least ordinary humans cannot do it. As for Superman type, it's easy to get in, but it's not so easy to get out. The people are here. Ivan Vanke looked coldly at the man who was unconscious on the wooden chair. Compared with a few years ago, his hair was completely gray. Muscles, but properly dressed as a martial artist. Ulysses Crow? You didn't kill him, did you? The unconscious man grabbed his head and looked at him twice. Albert stopped paying attention to him. Compared with his goods, Crow was originally just an addition. No, he was injected with sedatives in bed and will have to sleep for at least 3 or 4 hours. Under Albert's order, Ivan Vanko led a team of desperate fighters to raid Crow's cargo ship. In the face of inhuman power, he was just ordinary thieves have no ability to resist at all, and apart from the number, it does not bring any difficulties to the operation. How is he going to deal with it? Just leave it like this? Lock him up for now and inject sedatives regularly. Just make sure his brain can still be used. After that, Albert paused and made some calculations in his mind. Tony Stark's obsession with vibranium may have some consequences. How old, then continued, find a suitable opportunity to sell it to Tony Stark. Tony Stark? Why? Hearing this harsh name, Ivan Vanke's expression changed drastically. He followed Albert all these years just to avenge him. However, not only has he not seen hope so far, but he also wants to give Tony Stark offered help, which he couldn't accept. Don't you want revenge? Since you don't have enough strength, you have to learn to drive away tigers and devour wolves. Albert pointed at Crow, and he is a good bait to attract wolves. Wakanda? Can they deal with Tony Stark? Regarding Crow's information before taking action, Ivan also knew that he had stolen a large amount of vibranium from Wakanda. But what exactly did Wakanda, an isolated kingdom, possess? What kind of energy, he didn't know very well. Absolutely, otherwise I wouldn't have taken Tony Stark to see the vibranium in the Star Laboratory. Isn't this just to make him desire? Under Albert's special intervention, now Tony Stark and Iron Man, the 3 words are very different. Although they both have steel battlesuits, Shinto Stark is much more cold-blooded than Iron Man. He doesn't care about others, he only cares about himself. Especially after gaining favor with S.H.I.E.L.D. and meeting Albert, Tony saw S.H.I.E.L.D.'s sinister intentions and became further and further away from the path of the Avengers. Wakanda is the first step to continue to intensify the conflict. Albert does not deny that Tony is a genius, but it is not easy to get vibranium from Wakanda. As early as the last century, countless people coveted vibranium, which comes from the treasure of the universe, but how many people can actually get it? Crow is just one of the very lucky guys. He found the right opportunity at the right time, but he doesn't have the same opportunity now. If Tony wants to get vibranium, he has to do more. Continued confrontation will inevitably lead to a series of problems. S.H.I.E.L.D. will never sit idly by, and those who have already had a peek at Wakanda will feel like sharks smelling blood, and they will not give up this good opportunity. This is a whirlpool that attracts everyone who sets their sights on Wakanda, and then they all take sides in the face of interests and justice, making this whirlpool even more treacherous and swallowing more careerists. As for whether Tony Stark will take action against Wakanda, Haha, Albert doesn't have to worry about this at all. Geniuses all have one characteristic in common. They are curious. Even if they know there is a trap in front of them, they will be driven by curiosity to step on it, go down. Maybe Tony can suppress his desire for the magical substance vibranium, but he can't suppress his curiosity about the strange existence of Wakanda. Once he takes the 3.5 step, Albert doesn't even need to do anything. The torrent that follows it will push him forward. Stark Industry is such a perfect shield. With him as a pioneer, even if the coveted people in the dark cause trouble, they will have an easy explanation, right? Okay, let's go take a look at the goods. Seeing that Ivan still didn't believe it, Albert didn't want to explain to him. He thought it was better to be a pure Russian white bear. He didn't need to think so much, just do it. At the shore house, Tony Stark is thinking about the significance of Albert taking him to see vibranium. No one is a fool, and Albert's action is too obvious, just to let him see vibranium, and what does this mean? Jarvis, check out a country called Wakanda for me. Albert would not deceive him about the effect of vibranium, and as long as it was true, Tony would not let go of something that could change him qualitatively. He did not act like when you experience crises like that in movies, not all crises are visible on the surface. Violence is sometimes scary, but isn't cold violence scary? Tony did not encounter any threat to his life, but the fear from the unknown also squeezed his body and mind. In the past, he thought he was the top 14 in the world. But after the attack on the Imperial Cemetery, he discovered that there was still a deeper shadow hanging over his head, and over the head of the entire capital society. S.H.I.E.L.D. was just one of them. From an alien perspective, it is a very powerful pull among them. The feeling of falling from the cloud was not pleasant. Tony had never felt that everything he owned was so fragile. Hatred, Hulk, Dark Elves, and Thor from mythology all impacted Stark's outlook on life. If these were real, yes, then one day, a terrible existence will suddenly come and erase everything about him? Tony Stark is not a person who likes to sit back and wait for death. He prefers to take precautions before they happen, even if such precautions are originally part of the disaster. Isn't that why Ultron was born? In Tony, human survival instincts and self-destructive tendencies are both present. Show everything. So even if there is no apparent enemy, Tony Stark is still doing everything he can to strengthen himself. Even after Albert provided him with a way to cure palladium poisoning, Tony still chose to inject Extremis and turn the steel battlesuit, sending it into his own bones and blood through nanotechnology as the first step in his self-protection, and it will never be the only step. The properties of vibranium are like a cup of poison that can quench his thirst for Tony. Even knowing that Albert may be using him cannot weaken Tony's desire for vibranium. Moreover, Wakanda's most developed name also aroused Tony's curiosity. He admitted that in the face of dangerous alien creatures, he may lose, but he does not believe that there will be a country that surpasses him in the poor and weak plateau continent. The information about Wakanda has been collected and is being sorted out. Wakanda, located in eastern Africa, is a typical farming and pastoral country. It joined the United Nations in the late last century. Sir, I found a highly encrypted document, and it will take time to decrypt it. Highly confidential? When was it founded? Tony's eyes narrowed. There was no problem with the information found by Jarvis, but a highly encrypted document was not what an ordinary farming and pastoral country should receive. This Wakanda there is really a problem. August 1942. 1942? Wait. The incident with the captain of the United States happened a year later? The year 1942 was considered a relatively sensitive time period. Many things happened at that time, and it was also the rise of the Stark family. At the beginning, there were confidential documents about Wakanda in 1942. Thinking back to what Albert said, the shield that the captain of the United States obtained in 1943 and made by his father Howard had vibranium as the main material. Tony could roughly guess that what exactly was written in that document. Yes sir, the United States captain served in 1943 and died for his country 2 years later on the eve of the end of the war. Mobilize the satellites we can control. I want to know the situation in Wakanda at all times. Tony is still ready to give it a try. Apart from the design of the steel battlesuit, he has not done anything challenging for a long time. Wakanda is a suitable one. The goal, even if it wasn't for vibranium, Tony wanted to understand it. Yes, sir. Jarvis loyally carried out Tony's order. Under its precise control, The first batch of 12 satellites in low Earth orbit collectively turned their direction and began to scan the land of Wakanda. Groups of livestock were moving under the guidance of hard-working herders. Drive them into the pasture, start to enjoy their delicious meals, eat their belly full, and save fat for the coming of the cold winter. Is there anything unusual about 527? Tony stared at the scene of resistance, but he didn't find any problem at all, or he didn't originally know how to tell whether Wakanda was a relatively primitive country. In contrast, he has to rely on Jarvis. After all, he is not a secular scholar. Nothing unusual was found, sir, but there was a signal that was causing slight interference, causing our satellite to gradually deviate from its normal orbit. Stabilize the satellite and find the source of interference. Tony's eyes flashed. This time he no longer waited aside to let Jarvis handle it. Instead, he quickly pulled out the virtual console and quickly linked to the satellite that was monitoring Wakanda. This was his home field. Just as Tony was mobilizing the satellites, several secret base spaces on the Blue Star received an emergency notification at the same time. They did not communicate with each other, but they put down their work in a tacit understanding and cast their gazes one after another. Arriving on the Stark Industries satellite, they wanted to see the results. The extremely secretive flow of information is quietly changing the position of the Stark Industrial satellite in a way that is almost imperceptible to ordinary people. If it were not the artificial intelligence Jarvis that is actually controlling the satellite, no one might think that the satellite's deviation is man-made. What is caused will only be considered as normal orbital changes. There are not many countries on Blue Star with similar technology, but even among those big countries, Tony is confident that he can catch the other party's cobweb horse tracks. However, this time he failed. After half an hour of continuous attack, he had to. If you don't choose to give up, your previously invincible means will be like a fist on cotton when faced with this kind of interference. Even if you occasionally intercept a paragraph, you can only decipher some incomprehensible information, let alone find the source of the information. Even finding how interference works is extremely difficult. Tony watched with some frustration as the satellite gradually shifted its orbit, and all the pictures moved away from Wakanda. Now he believed that there was a powerful technological power on the African continent, which everyone thought was a lost world. But once failure could not completely dampen his confidence. On the contrary, this failure made Tony more urgent to understand this country that he had never known before. Failure is originally a process of growth. Geniuses are not afraid of failure. What they are afraid of is that nothing can make them fail. The despair of having little way forward is the most terrifying thing. And the difficulties in front of them are motivation, urging them to keep moving forward. Motivation to act. It's very good. Although our technology is not mature yet, fortunately there are enough materials for experiments. Placed in front of Elbert are rows of vibranium raw materials preserved in transparent cylinders. These are all from Crow. Wakanda stole them. In the movie, Ultron paid Cloud $2.6 billion to buy them. This is by no means a small sum. This metal is simply a creation of God. I have never seen anything like it. Ivan Vanki also looked at the vibranium in his hand in surprise, even though he had seen it before when he attacked Crow's cargo ship, but again when he saw it once, he was no less surprised. As a scientist, he knew very well the significance of these metals, which was enough to form a subversive change zone. It is not the material of Blue Star. If you have to say it is a gift from God, there is no problem. Vibranium has a certain meaning to Elbert, but for him who already possesses type particles, the meaning is not so great. The reason why people intercepted this batch of vibranium wandering outside Wakanda was naturally only part of the plan. Only by cutting off all external factors can Wakanda be isolated. Otherwise, if people knew that Crow was wandering around with a bunch of vibranium, who would take the great risk to test Wakanda? Although Crow is a dangerous terrorist, but in the face of the world's multipolar regimes, he is not even a docile little white rabbit. All of these are going to be used as research materials. Ivan Vanki was a little impatient and wanted to start studying this new gadget. Although he looked like a thug, his scientific heart was still very firm. Even if knowing the gap between himself and Tony Stark, he never thought about giving up. Sometimes he was more enthusiastic about scientific research than Killian. It's absolutely impossible. You can just take a batch out later and store the rest until you come up with a feasible method of use instead of simply shaping them. Vibranium originally had excellent strength, but the birth of adamantium it proves that it still has the possibility of growth. Even if Elbert doesn't originally need this, He is still willing to strengthen his subordinates. It is not easy to be a mere commander. In recent years, thanks to subordinates like Raza, he can a relatively relaxing time. Boss, Tony Stark took the bait. Our system detected that he was monitoring Wakanda and frequently adjusting Stark Industries satellites. Arranged Ivan Vanki to deal with vibranium, and it didn't take long for Raza to bring him a good solution according to the news. Tony lived up to expectations and got involved with Wakanda. Since he couldn't capture or understand the other party's interference signal, he used the most satellites to share the pressure. He didn't believe that the other party could really jam all the satellites at once. That's good news. Where are those old things? Elbert nodded with satisfaction. This was the result he wanted. Before the plan started, he had conducted a detailed investigation of Wakanda, but he didn't get much useful information. On the contrary, I met many colleagues, and they went back and forth. Although they didn't have any exchanges, they were very clear about each other's existence. The appeal of vibranium is so great that all countries that know about the existence of this thing will pay more or less attention to Wakanda. Although they have little understanding of the inside, they can clearly feel the various external defense facilities one by one. As soon as Tony used satellites to monitor Wakanda, 17 or 8 satellites from different countries were instantly targeted at Stark Industries satellites for real-time monitoring. And this new member also gave them a different hope. The existence of the leader is for cohesion. In this case, once there are more people and they become a rope, they will start to have confidence and be very confident, blind faith. Damn, the interference is still too great. The satellites will start to drift if they can maintain a normal field of view for 3 to 5 seconds at most. I need more satellites to share the pressure. After doing everything possible to mobilize all the satellites that Stark Industries can use, there is still a long way to go to successfully escape interference, but the results show that Tony's method is indeed effective. When an interference source acts on multiple targets at the same time, it will be weakened to a certain extent, and the more targets there are, the more lines there will be. Jarvis can perform multiple tracking and ultimately locate an accurate interference source. Sir, there are military satellites from many countries following our movements, and the interference has been further weakened. Just when Tony was considering whether to borrow satellites from others, Jarvis suddenly reported an unexpected news to him, which made Tony couldn't help laughing. Speaking out, he is not the only one who wants to take advantage of Wakanda. Go on, send them a signal. I think we have enough allies. Tony has always been used to fighting alone, because geniuses don't need others to interfere in their own affairs. But to be honest, this feeling is not bad. People always need help from friends. 403, especially when you encounter difficulties now. Soon, when the available resources were abundant enough, Tony repeatedly adjusted the layout of all satellites. Although the interference was powerful, it was no more than a corner of almost all the top powers on the Blue Star today except Wakanda. Wakanda is half a century ahead of today's technology, but if you use modern military weapons to enter the battlefield of World War II, it may be crushed, but it will definitely not leave the army at that time without resistance. As long as there is no qualitative change, even Wakanda will not be able to resist. There is no way to eradicate prying eyes. Very good, let's see what's here. When the interference is reduced to a minimum, under the monitoring of all satellites, the entire Wakanda is on display. It has never been exposed to others like this, so even if Wakanda's technology hides it, but some things cannot withstand detection. Sir, there is an extremely powerful energy field surrounding the entire Wakanda. There is only one close record of this level of power in my database. Jarvis showed Tony a 3-dimensional map of Wakanda, which highlighted the surface. A huge amount of elliptical energy field covers the entire Wakanda. They are both defense and the best hiding place. Unless this energy field is disabled, no one can truly see the whole picture of Wakanda. Is there any similar record? Don't tell me there is another country on the Blue Star that is comparable to Wakanda. That's crazy. Tony was a little surprised. He knew very well what kind of power such a large-scale energy field had, but Jarvis's answer promptly answered his question. Big Ivan, the largest nuclear bomb released in 1961. Oh, okay. Record all the ability mobile nodes, and then restore the satellite to normal operation. Tony knew that it was impossible to really get in touch with Wakanda on his own. Fortunately, some people extended an olive branch, and Tony didn't be prepared to reject them. After seeing what kind of advanced technology Wakanda possesses, Tony already has enough desire to get them. This is a treasure that should not be exclusive to Wakanda. As for going to Wakanda to obtain technical exchanges through diplomacy, haha. This may be a feasible option, but Tony is not prepared to do this. Not to mention whether he has this position, even if it is really successful, what he will get by then what does it count as? Only by digging deep can we know the truth. Expecting to obtain Wakanda's highest technology through diplomatic means is simply a fantasy. Otherwise, they would not have hidden it until now. Do you really think that those countries that have long known about Wakanda's existence have not tried similar methods? Predation is the truth of everything, just like America's ancestors did. Tony believed that he was not the only one who thought so he quickly contacted those friendly friends, and they would work together to obtain everything in Wakanda. Struggle. Director, Tony Stark suddenly started satellite surveillance of Wakanda. SHIELD. Nick Fury also received the relevant information immediately, which made his mind expand instantly. Since the last time, Tony Stark's attitude towards SHIELD has changed. He took a turn for the worse, almost without being targeted, which undoubtedly made Nick Fury feel helpless. Who knew that Tony Stark actually directly cured his body? Wakanda. The reason, I want to know the reason. For a moment, Nick Fury even wanted to push him behind. As the highest level special department of Blue Star, SHIELD also paid attention to Wakanda. If Tony can really break through Wakanda's defense, then they will also be the beneficiaries, but Nick Fury quickly stopped this unrealistic thought. Let's not talk about whether Tony can succeed, just because of the possible consequences of this process. The shock was enough reason for him to give up the idea. Before that, Tony went to Osborn Industries. With the word Osborn in advance, Hill looked helpless. They all knew that Elbert was an extremely dangerous person, but there was no way to target him. Over the years, Osborn Industries had simply become a restricted area. This is undoubtedly a stain that cannot be washed away for SHIELD. It's Elbert again. What does he want to do after 2 years of silence? Nick Fury shouted to vent his dissatisfaction. SHIELD used to be the highest organizational department of Blue Star. Everyone must be under their control, even Tony Stark. They also had ways to deal with it, but Elbert broke this rule. Even though they knew Elbert was dangerous, they couldn't take any measures against him. Since he could destroy the entire Dark Elves in an instant, could he also destroy them? Destroy everything on this planet? Closely monitor Tony Stark. If he does anything outrageous, stop him. We can't fall out with Wakanda. Nick Fury said that he was very tired, but in order for Blue Star to maintain stability, some things must be done. As Blue Star, Wakanda, one of the most mysterious places in the world, Nick Fury knows what powers they hold. There is no doubt that if a war breaks out, they will be a formidable opponent. Nick Fury does not think Wakanda has the ability to defeat the world. But sometimes it is not that the opponent is inferior to you, and you can provoke at will. The wrath of a man can even splash blood 5 steps away, completely angering the country that is half a century ahead of Blue Star. The price paid must be extremely terrifying. But director, you know, Tony Stark won't listen to us at all. Hill shook his head helplessly. Tony Stark didn't like SHIELD's attitude at all, not to mention that he might have been instigated by Elbert. It was not easy to stop him. Then take coercive measures. Wakanda's matter is not a trivial matter. We cannot allow him to undermine international relations. Nick Fury's attitude became tougher. The relationship between countries is different from that between people. Although Tony Stark has some acting wantonly, but he knew what to do and what not to do before, but now he has crossed the line. Nick Fury is not sure if this is his own idea, but in any case, this is beyond the normal level. Yes, director. Hill nodded, then looked at Nick Fury with some hesitation, gritted his teeth and said, Director, I suggest you go for a psychological evaluation. You have been in a bad state recently. Don't worry, I'm fine. It's just been a lot of trouble recently. I just need to take a rest. Nick turned his back to Hill and looked outside the space carrier through the one-way glass. Several fighter jets started to fly away. These are not SHIELD fighters, but from the American government. After the Dark Elf attack, the wreckage of the battleship was divided up. As the landowner, America naturally took the most, but greed would not be satisfied. Now that the American government had absorbed a lot, he began to pay attention to other things, and SHIELD was the first to bear the brunt. Indivo. It's obviously a technical exchange, but secretly they don't want to get the research results of SHIELD. However, Nick Fury can't refuse them. As a result, People from various departments on the space carrier come up to communicate every day, forcing Nick Fury to do so. I had to come up with something to calm things down. Okay, I'm going to do something first. Hill left the office with some doubts. It's not that Nick Fury has never encountered more troublesome things, but his mood swings have been too great recently, which is a bit inappropriate. If it is understandable for Hill to occasionally lose control of her emotions, but as an agent, she is still top-notch. Nick Fury should not let her emotions continue to lose control, but Nick is her boss after all, and reminding her is the best she can do. The moment Hill left the office, Nick Fury covered his head and sat on the chair, as if he was enduring some pain. When he raised his head, a black light suddenly flashed in his eyes, and he turned around. Not to see any fighter jets taking off, but to hide the abnormality in his eyes. After a few minutes, Nick gasped violently and gradually returned to normal, but the bloodshot eyes in his eyes showed that his condition was not normal at all. He opened the drawer with some hesitation, looked at a copper plate lying inside, and thought for a moment. I still chose to close the drawer. Maybe the Ancient One has a way to solve his own problem, but, thinking of the similar light in her eyes when he first met the Ancient One, Nick Fury finally chose to wait, at least to maintain the status quo before the problem completely got out of control. Nick Fury's thoughts began to wander. Was the Ancient One really unable to leave because he blocked Dormammu? Or was she doing it on purpose? She didn't care whether New York would be breached or whether the Dark Elves would kill a large number of civilians. Why does she think that Elbert will definitely take action? Maybe Ancient One is very strong, but Elbert is equally scary. Maybe Ancient One just made a random excuse at the time, but in the end, Elbert really took action, and she originally didn't protect them at all. Idea. Unreasonable thoughts spread crazily in Nick Fury's mind. Some thoughts that he would not think deeply about suddenly appeared and continued to sprout, eventually forming deep doubts about the Ancient One. Yes, let's continue like this. Ha 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 ha. In the dark world, an indescribable terrifying shadow crossed the dimension. Looking at Nick Fury, who was trapped in the thought induction, he smiled excitedly. The Ancient One felt that he could stop it forever. He, as the master of the dark dimension, is omnipresent. As long as there is still darkness, he can reach anywhere. He only needs a small carrier. More than a month has passed since Tony first spied on Wakanda. During this period, Tony never stopped probing, and the allies behind him became more and more powerful. Hill, who was sent by Nick Fury to stop him, soon couldn't withstand the pressure and turned to Wakanda. S.H.I.E.L.D. calls for help. Maybe whoever communicates with Tony is not a big boss, and most of them are at Ross's level. Who cares about S.H.I.E.L.D.'s opinion? Although on the surface, they will still give some face. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. belongs to the Security Council. In the final analysis, it is still a global organization, has the right to interfere with them, but in fact, we can do whatever we want. If you want to sanction us, you can come up with evidence. Without evidence, you are slandering. Believe it or not, I will sue the United Nations to sue. 060. Have you banned it? Faced with such a confident attitude, S.H.I.E.L.D. is also the leader of the two. These are grandfathers, and no one is easy to mess with. Even the system S.H.I.E.L.D. can't get into it, so how can it get evidence? What's more, Wakanda is registered as a third world country by the United Nations. What position does S.H.I.E.L.D. take to stop them? Explain Wakanda's situation clearly? That will only make these guys more blatant. Since it was you, Wakanda, who was the first to be unkind and deceived the whole world, then don't blame me for being unjust. Therefore, the intervention of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a joke. In theory, they are aloof and qualified to investigate all people or things that threaten the stability of the world. But that is when others give you face. If others don't give you face, what can you do? A superpower is not, it's a joke. How can it be that you, a S.H.I.E.L.D., say that it can be controlled by restrictions? You can't even control in America. You want all the three poles of Asia, Europe and the United States to be under the jurisdiction of your S.H.I.E.L.D. It's too beautiful to think. Under such circumstances, Tony Stark, in addition to keeping a low profile, spends almost every day testing Wakanda's energy field without eating or sleeping, not only pursuing cracking. More is still learning. It is not an exaggeration to say that Wakanda's technology is half a century ahead of today's. Even a genius like Tony eagerly absorbs knowledge beyond his imagination, and then shares the essence with his allies, in exchange for greater support. Just the way Wakanda's energy runs makes many people feel that this wave is worth it, so they are more than satisfied with Tony's requirements, and actively help him stop investigations by departments including but not limited to SHIELD, CIA, etc. Just a peripheral defense can bring them a lot of benefits, so what if they can successfully enter Wakanda? The thought of this makes Ping excited. As Stark Industries' official partner and actual instigator, Osborn Industries is naturally listed as Tony's first-choice ally. Elbert's attitude in this regard surprised Tony. He can negotiate if he wants something, but Osborn Industries will not interfere. We don't want the technology you got, it's in an OB state the whole time. Boss, do you think Tony Stark and the others can succeed? Are we really not going to make a fortune? Raza looked at the various information about Wakanda sent by Tony and asked with some itch. This is a good opportunity. And the law does not hold everyone accountable. Even if something goes wrong, Stark Industries will take care of it. Is it possible that Wakanda can be so crazy that it kills all the participants? If they really wanted to do this, they wouldn't be huddled in Africa with thousands of people. Years. When did you become so interested in technology? Elbert glanced at Raza and saw that he was hesitating a little, and knew that it was Killian and Ivan who were pushed out of the tank. The ones who really wanted to attack Wakanda were Killian and Ivan. Benki is a real scientist, but they can't explain it clearly, so they let Raza, a confidant who followed Elbert for the first time, to find out what he has to say. Well, I'm not thinking about you, boss. Raza said with a simple and honest expression. He hasn't learned much else over the years, but he has mastered the skills of the smiling tiger. His originally fierce face now looks. It's a bit cordial, but if anyone really judges others by their appearance, be prepared to keep your head. Okay, go tell them that I won't be involved in Wakanda's affairs, and I won't stop any of them from going it alone. Wakanda does have a lot of good things, but it doesn't matter if they are irreplaceable. On the other hand, Elbert just wants to have some fun in this peaceful life. There is no need to be a joker himself and risk his life. Besides, you can be sold to Tony by Crow one day for a good price. Yes, boss. Raza lowered his head and walked out of the office. He didn't want to pay attention to this matter at first. After all, he really didn't understand technology. It would be more refreshing if you let him take the lead in the charge. Just under the same roof, Killian and Ivan Benki both came to him, so he couldn't refuse. Now that Elbert has something to say, he can have an explanation. Wakanda. Ha! Elbert looked at Wakanda's position on the world map and sneered. Fighting against the whole world will definitely pay a price. If Asgard is not on Blue Star 2.5, it doesn't matter, but since you are on Blue Star, if you still expect to remain anonymous today, you're thinking too much. Leading in technology does not mean you can sit back and relax. This is the Marvel Universe, a world overflowing with all kinds of black technology. If you want to protect Wakanda from being invaded, just relying on an energy field is not enough. Now you are just working in secret. In order to look good, everyone will consciously reduce their size. The scope of influence is huge, but once something really big happens, believe it or not, Wakanda instantly becomes the target of public criticism. The final fate of the children who walk through the market with huge sums of money will be theirs. Either to compromise or to be forced to compromise, unless Wakanda can persuade them. The vast majority of international forces, but is this possible? Boss. Elbert was taking a leisurely nap when he was woken up by Raza's shout. He reluctantly opened his eyes and looked at Raza, who trotted in displeased ly. What happened? Speak slowly. As my subordinate, don't always be rash. Raza nodded and forced himself to calm down, but still trotted to Elbert and asked breathlessly. Boss, have you read Marvel Daily? Elbert frowned slightly, having a bad premonition. Before he could speak, Raza had already handed the tablet to him, and a piece of news that shocked the Marvel Universe was eye-catching on the screen. Who publishes the daily report? Elbert's frown deepened, and the wrinkles on his brow could almost kill a fly. Raza lowered his voice and told Elbert carefully. Who else can it be? It's definitely Veda himself. Both SHIELD and CIA have been blocked. As high-tech countries, how can they sit still and wait for death? So, now is 14 use the pressure of public opinion to push back those big countries that want to take advantage? Using the pressure of public opinion, Veda is still too young. If those countries were really afraid of the pressure of public opinion, they would not even ignore SHIELD and CIA. Elbert shook his head and smiled, with a bit of helplessness on his face. However, Veda's move was also a helpless move after using many methods to no avail. He couldn't sit back and wait for death, right? Its technology is half ahead of the Marvel Universe, but that is also the result of consuming a lot of manpower, material and financial resources of the country. How many batches of researchers have been killed for this top technology? How can the good things of this country be taken away by those robbers who say they will take them away? In the past, if you were behind, you would be beaten, but now if you are ahead, you will be divided and invaded. What kind of world is this? I feel that Veda is engaged in a meaningless struggle now. Instead of struggling to his death, it is better to have a good talk with those countries and sign treaties. At least the end will not be so miserable. Raza touched his nose and said. Elbert shook his head and expressed his own opinion on this. That's not necessarily true. Human greed is infinite. As long as you let him see hope, he will intensify his efforts to rob and embezzle, wishing to take away all of Veda's possessions. He has all the technology in his pocket, and he wants to take all the researchers from Veda to his own country. Although Veda's move is not considered wise, it at least shows his attitude and position. Never compromise. This attitude of defending rights to the death should make those countries restrain themselves. Raza nodded in understanding and said, Boss, what do you think Veda should do to save herself? Definitely make allies and seek help. Elbert said to the point. Veda is a small country. Although it has top-notch technology and is extremely rich, the power of an individual is limited after all. Only by forming alliances can we save it from dire straits. In fact, it was not Elbert's surprise that Avada ended up in this situation. Avada has always relied on its advanced technology and looked down on many other countries. When other countries wanted to learn from it and improve their own technological level, it even hid it and was unwilling to share it. Nowadays, Veda is being bullied, and there are very few countries that stand on the same line as it. Big countries are coming to snatch resources. As for small countries, the bold ones will rush forward, hoping to get a share of the pie. Those who are timid will be like the masses, neither robbing nor helping, just watching from afar. This state is somewhat disappointing. Hey, that hot search is gone. When Raza suddenly looked at the screen of his tablet, he found that the hot search article that had been fermenting very quickly on the internet disappeared almost in a whoosh. He tried to search for related terms, but found that it was all in vain and could not be found at all. Elbert's eyes moved slightly, and his body moved from the boss's chair in front of the desk to the leather sofa beside him. He leaned back slightly and closed his eyelids slightly, as if he was tired. Raza was very discerning. When he saw this, he immediately put away the tablet and said, Boss, are you tired? You can rest first and come back to me if you need anything. Wait a minute. Elbert's deep and mellow voice sounded in the large office. Raza nodded and stood respectfully in front of Elbert, with his head slightly lowered, his waist bent, and his ears raised, waiting for Elbert's instructions. Always pay attention to the developments in Veda and other major countries. If there is any disturbance, report it to me. Yes, boss. Raza lowered his head in response, with a fleeting look of complexity in his eyes, and turned around to retreat. Before going out, don't forget to close the office door gently. Elbert looked at the closed door, his lips moving slightly, thoughtfully. Although he closed his eyes, his mind was still spinning, thinking about Veda. For such a small country, it is still a somewhat self-righteous country that rarely communicates with other countries. Definitely, it has the capital to be self-righteous, but it is indeed not a good strategy to build things behind closed doors, send bacteria to others, and have very little exchanges. There is definitely a reason why it does this. Its closing the country is not closed, as everyone thinks, but to prevent the country's top secrets from being stolen. But everything has two sides. The consequence of doing this is that it has no friends, and now it is in a helpless situation. Even the articles published by the first newspaper in the Marvel Universe were all deleted by public relations in less than half an hour. No matter how you search, you can't find any trace of it. Elbert could have just sat back and ignored it. In fact, it was none of his business. However, he just sat here with nothing to do, and he always felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. So after thinking about it, he still felt that he should do something. Veda is in urgent need of allies now. Maybe Elbert can help connect people, build a bridge or something. He doesn't covet Veda's things, but he can't bear to look at such a technological power. It was divided up to the point where nothing was left. As soon as this thought came to his mind, Elbert was even surprised. You must know that when he first traveled to this world, his mentality was completely different from now. At that time, he was not interested in anything and had no big pursuits. The idea at that time was to make peace with what he had come. God gave him a new identity and asked him to come to the Marvel Universe and live as Albert. Then he would live well, neither causing trouble nor committing crimes, and living peacefully. Living this life is enough. But who knew that so many things happened later, including what happened to Veda now, that he could no longer just be an ordinary spectator. Albert made a pot of green tea, poured himself a cup, and brought it to the floor-to-ceiling window. The white steam of freshly brewed green tea is curling up, and the fragrance of tea is overflowing. Although the man was sipping the tea, his mind was not on the tea. Caroline came at the right time. As soon as Albert finished drinking the cup of tea in his hand, she opened the office door and walked in. "Boss, this is the latest report sent by Xingchen Laboratory. Please take a look." After Caroline finished her report, she turned to go out, but Albert stopped her. "Boss." Caroline lowered her head slightly, waiting for Albert's instructions. Albert's slender fingers stroked the pattern of the teacup and glanced at the report on the desk, but did not read it. He had more important things to do now. He raised his eyes slightly, and his tone was as leisurely as his expression. "I haven't seen Mr. Tony for a while. I miss him very much. Please help me invite him over and have a cup of tea together." "Yes, boss." Albert definitely doesn't miss Tony anymore, let alone inviting him over for tea. But as a secretary, Caroline would never ask too many questions. Years of being a secretary taught her what to ask and what not to ask. Drinking tea? Who has time to drink tea with him? After listening to Jasvi's report, Tony rolled his eyes. He was currently busy monitoring Veda's affairs. He was bound to get the rare material vibranium. "Tell Albert that I'm very busy and tell him to leave me alone." After Tony finished speaking to Jasvi, his attention returned to the computer screen. The department responsible for surveillance would keep synchronizing information to him. However, except for the hot search 2 hours ago, Veda has no more responses for the time being to Tusker Industries and other ambitious forces. Which country is the most technologically powerful in the Marvel Universe? Which country is half a century ahead? Under their overwhelming power, they are not just like eggs, but if an egg dares to touch a stone, that is simply overestimating one's capabilities. Jasvi did not leave immediately. Looking at Tony, who was back at work, he hesitated to speak. Tony suddenly raised his head and saw Jasvi still standing there, frowning slightly dissatisfied. "Why don't you leave and stay here to hinder my eyes?" Only then did Jasvi speak cautiously, but the messenger on Albert's side said that you must go there. "What Mr. Albert wants to talk to you about is Waida." Tony was so angry that he wanted to hit someone, and his sharp eyes were directed at Jasvi. "Can't you just say, 'delivery,' all at once?" Jasvi lowered his head and did not dare to speak. The boss had been too irritable recently, so it was better to speak less. While he was talking, Tony had already picked up the coat hanging on the back of the chair and hurried out. When he reached the door, he stopped again and looked back. "Have you finished speaking? Is there anything else you want to report?" Jasvi shook his head repeatedly and said no. Tony said coldly, "Why don't you go quickly? Go down and drive for me." Tony's car quickly arrived at the Osborne Company building. The towering buildings and bright glass dazzled him. "Damn Albert, why do you have to choose this time to drink tea? I really don't want to come to this damn place." Tony got out of the car and kept talking. Complaints are complaints. It's not that he really doesn't want to come, it's about Veda, so he has to come even if he doesn't want to. Caroline quickly picked up Tony and asked him to sit in the reception room. "Where's Albert?" As soon as Tony sat down on the sofa, he couldn't wait to ask where Albert was. Caroline replied respectfully, "Mr. Tony, please wait a moment. The boss is still in a meeting. He will be here soon." "What, you want me to wait for him?" Tony was so angry that he stood up and was about to leave. Caroline hurriedly said with a smile, "Don't be angry. The meeting is over soon and the boss will be here soon." Tony suppressed his anger and sat back on the sofa extremely unhappy. About half an hour later, Albert finally appeared in the reception room. Osborne's boss is really busy with everything he has to do. As soon as he saw Albert come in, Tony twitched the corner of his mouth and said nothing in his tone. Albert smiled slightly and walked in slowly. "Mr. Tony, I've been waiting for a long time. Do you want tea or coffee?" Tony rolled his eyelids and said in a cold voice, "Except I don't like tea or coffee, I'm only interested in Veda." Even though Tony said no, Albert went to make a pot of tea leisurely and calmly, poured a cup for the guest opposite, and poured another cup for himself. "Let's be more direct. If you talk to me about Vida, do you also want to get a share of it? Tony directly pushed away the cup of tea in front of him and looked at Elbert intently, with an expression on his face that seemed to be a smile but not a smile. Let me just say, how could you be so kind and tell me that there is vibranium in Veda? You want it, but you don't have the ability to get it, so why don't you let me clear the way? After listening to Tony's words, Elbert just smiled slightly, took a sip, and then said calmly, Tony, you misunderstood me. HMPH. Tony snorted coldly. Stop pretending to be in front of me. You may look majestic, but you're actually full of evil. After hearing this, Elbert couldn't help but burst into laughter. He drank 2 more sips of tea before saying, the things you did made too much noise, and I already know it. Before Elbert could finish speaking, Tony rushed to say, SHIELD. And CIA know it, and the whole world knows it. Do you know what's so strange about it? Elbert put away the leisurely look he had just shown, looked at Tony seriously, and said in a serious tone, forget it that you covet Veda's technology yourself, and you also united with so many other forces to illegally appropriate it. Your mother is here, this will destroy a technological country. HMPH, hum. Tony hummed several times with a look of disapproval. The weak eat the strong, natural selection. The winner takes all. Navida cannot withstand the destruction, a small country, but it monopolizes so much you deserve the energy you deserve. Elbert frowned, you have forgotten your original intention. Tony smiled sarcastically, my original intention is to be the strongest person in the Marvel world. No matter the cost, not afraid of any means. Elbert was silent. It worked, and sure enough it worked. The power of the aggressive method he used on Tony was far beyond his expectations. Now Tony's inner greed has reached its peak. Although I am hegemonic, I also understand that good things must be shared by everyone. Elbert, we have cooperated for so long, and you should have a piece of the big cake of Vida. Tony said. Elbert shook his head and said without thinking, thank you, but I don't need this cake. Tony's eyes moved slightly, his hands spread out on the armrests of the sofa, and his tone was a little lazy. Then what are you asking me for? Could it be that you want me to let Vida go? No, Elbert raised his eyes and looked at Tony. I don't expect you to stop. I just hope you can draw a line, show some mercy, and don't kill everyone. After all, Vida is also a part of the Marvel Universe. You can use you want something, but you can't destroy the order of the planet. Haha. Tony seemed to have heard some big joke. If Elbert is so holy, why did he tell me about vibranium in Vida in the first place? Now that he told me, he asked me to restrain myself. Don't you think you are funny? Mr. Tony, don't be a good person when you get an advantage. Tony's rude words made Elbert's eyes become sharp. His eyes were like X-rays, as if they could pierce a person's body. If Elbert hadn't revealed the information to Tony, Tony might not even know about vibranium, let alone know that there are many such things in Veda. Tony changed his sitting position, folded his legs together, intertwined his fingers and rested them on his legs, waiting for Elbert's next sentence as if nothing had happened. Elbert also said the following words, you and I are both businessmen, and businessmen put interests first, but I hope you will leave room for things. Tony replied coldly, are you teaching me how to do it? Elbert's tone was calm. Do you think I want to teach you how to do things? If you hadn't made too much noise and alerted SHIELD and CIA, I would have asked you to come over for tea? The corners of Tony's mouth twitched, as if he wanted to say something, but he still couldn't. He knew that now was not the time to fall out with Elbert. Because although the size of the Osborn factory is far smaller than that of the Stark factory, Elbert recruits all capable people. He himself is originally very strong, so there is no guarantee that he will not rise to prominence one day. The more friends you have, the easier it will be to travel. It is better to dissolve enemies than to make enemies. Okay, thank you for your advice. I will go back and think about it carefully. I have many things to do and am busy at work, so I won't accompany you. Tony stood up from the sofa as he spoke, straightened the tie on his chest, and then strode out. Elbert glanced at the cold tea on the table and couldn't help but complain to the door, it's a waste of a good cup of tea. My friend brought it back from the next continent, what a waste. Tony, who had already reached the door, paused. Elbert could only see his back but not the expression on his face. But Elbert is sure that Tony's face must be disgusting. This is the result he wants. If Tony is not happy, he will be happy. This is also a way of fighting between rivals, or so Elbert thinks. Raza came back to report that the latest news is that Veda is looking for allies. Elbert nodded. Well, Veda is not too stupid. Raza couldn't help but give Elbert a thumbs up. Boss, you are really amazing at predicting the trend of the situation accurately. Elbert waved his hand. I can't say it's accurate, I just have a good understanding of human nature. And his understanding of human nature also benefits from the support of the Speed Force. That power not only made his entire body stronger, but also made his entire brain smarter and wiser. But he knew that his Speed Force still had a lot of room for improvement. Therefore, what he has to do now is to use his greatest ability to develop his potential. So, he couldn't let Tony destroy Veda. Because besides vibranium, Veda has many things he wants. Boss, are you ready to take action? Raza is an impatient activist. Seeing Elbert being so leisurely and content every day, he felt a little anxious for him. A typical emperor is not in a hurry and eunuchs are. What should I do? Elbert leaned lazily on the back of his chair. Bia. And his voice was extremely lazy. Let Veda figure it out on his own first. Poor Raza was really suffering from the pain. He had been inquiring and delivering intelligence these days, and he was not given the opportunity to use force. He was afraid that if this continued, fungi would grow on his body. Elbert saw through Raza's thoughts at a glance, and said quietly, if you are too busy, go and fight with your men, one by one, take turns. Good. Although Raza promised, he was still depressed in his heart. Although the people in his hands were all elite soldiers and generals, they were nothing compared to him. It's boring to fight them. Elbert has no time to pay attention to Raza's current state of mind. He has more important things to do. At 10 o'clock at night, New York City is still full of neon lights, and the roads are still busy with traffic. The crimson lightning appeared again in the sky over the city, and it disappeared so quickly that one suspected one was dazzled. Elbert looked deeply at this city that never sleeps, and his heart was even more excited. 3 years have passed by, and he has transformed from a low-level researcher who was fired at the request of others to the leader of Osborne Industries. But he knew that this was just the beginning. He remembers that door all the time, that door that does not exist. That door was both pressure and motivation, hope and fear for him. Every time he thought about this, he would urge himself to go faster, faster, accumulate capital faster, and improve his own energy field faster. Only in this way can he calmly deal with all unknown things. He flew around New York City and finally landed in front of his villa. Pressing the familiar 6-digit code, the door of the villa opened instantly, and Elbert slowly walked in. He took off his shiny leather shoes and put on wide and soft slippers, and was about to get a bottle of red wine. At this time, the mobile phone in his pocket vibrated violently. He took out his cell phone and saw a series of new text messages. Sent by Raza. Boss, the latest news. Veda has found new allies, namely Alaska and Bangladesh. Elbert only glanced at it and threw the phone back on the sofa. Alaska and Bangladesh are both small countries, even smaller than Waiita. At present, Veda can only find allies at this level. Bigger and more powerful countries disdain to ally with it, even though it has the most powerful high technology in the Marvel Universe. Tony, on the other hand, didn't know whether it was because of Elbert's words or some other reason, but he didn't act rashly for the time being. The situation is now stable and everything is business as usual. Things are developing according to plan, so Elbert naturally doesn't need to worry too much. He opened a bottle of red wine and poured himself a glass. While shaking the scarlet liquid in the glass, he walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. In fact, his current ability has become stronger and stronger. Not only has his speed accelerated from the initial 200 sonic speeds to the current 300 factors. At the same time, he also has a powerful skill, the stealth skill. No matter it is day or night, he can enter any place as he pleases. It can be said that he comes and goes freely. With this stealth skill and his super speed, it is extremely easy for him to steal money. But that is illegal and cannot be done. He is a good law-abiding citizen. Under his management, Osborne Industries is also booming. Although the current rate of money coming in is far from what he expected, it is getting better after all. Now he not only has dozens of luxury cars and several villas that he bought in full, but also bars and manors. If he wanted, he could even buy a street outright. But Elbert felt that it was not necessary. Glancing at the bright night outside, he raised his neck, drank the liquid in the cup in one gulp, and turned towards the sofa. There is a small square table in front of the sofa, and a laptop is placed on the table. Albert didn't think much, he just clicked the mouse and entered a black website. This website can see foreign information, and he browses relevant information about Veda and the two small countries it is allied with. Searching for information is only one of the purposes, the second is also the more important purpose. Albert wants to find a local spy in Veda to constantly provide him with the latest information. Albert understands very well that no matter how long his hand is, no matter how capable his men are, it is not as good as having a local spy over there to make the news better informed. Moreover, finding people in Veda would not be easy to expose, which would make it easier for him to carry out his plan. Transactions on the dark web are very reliable, and the spies you find will never cheat. Because only those with ability can enter the dark web, while those who can trade must abide by the rules. As long as the money is in place, nothing is a problem. Even if Albert is in New York, he can make plans thousands of miles away. After arranging the spies, he opened the stock software and prepared to sell the stocks in batches. The reason for selling in batches is very simple. He has too many chips and too much capital. Selling them all at once will attract too much attention. He does not want to attract attention. Everyone knows that Osborne Industries has been booming in the past 2 years, unlike before, and they also know that Albert has made a lot of money. But no one knows the exact number of how much money he earned. They will definitely not know the specific number. After all, Albert's current amount of funds is far from being on the Forbes rich list. However, his strong capital cannot be underestimated. Otherwise, he would not be able to invest $2 billion in the stock market at one time. Moreover, he invested all of these $2 billion in Tusker's stock. The level of madness is astonishing. However, it turned out that his move was correct. The market value of Tusker's stock is so large that even if it falls, it won't plummet all of a sudden. He has time to operate. Fortunately, the stock rose as he hoped, with a profit of 11%. For such a large amount of capital, this profit is really considerable. All veterans of the stock market know that you can't be greedy when you make a profit. Albert is not a veteran, but he also knows that he can't be greedy. After all, a bird in the hand is worth 100 in the bush. After the operation, Albert turned off the stock software and finally reached the most relaxing moment of the day. He took a hot bath and had a good sleep. The next day, he was woken up by his stomach growling. In the past, Albert used to read a morning newspaper before going down to have breakfast. But today, he was so hungry that he had to skip this step. After simply washing up, he went straight downstairs to have breakfast. The home nanny had just brought the exquisite breakfast to the table and was about to call Albert when she found that the man was already sitting at the dining table. "Sir, please have a meal," the nanny said respectfully and stepped aside. After breakfast, Albert walked out of the door. The driver had already driven over and was waiting there. Sitting in the car, Albert realized something. Since he had an additional invisibility skill, he seemed to be particularly prone to hunger. In addition to having to eat a midnight snack at night, he also woke up earlier than usual in the morning. He was woken up by hunger. Fortunately, this didn't have much impact on him, and he didn't think it was a bad thing. He got so much, so he should exchange it for something. What's more, becoming a foodie is not a bad thing. The direction the luxury car was driving was not Osborne's headquarters building because today was not a working day. Today is Saturday, Albert's day off. The place he goes to now is Manhattan Restaurant. New York is a city where dangers are hidden everywhere, but it is also prosperous and lively. In other cities, at 8 o'clock in the morning, the shop doors would still be closed. But in New York, when it's just dawn, you can see the shopping mall. The doors of the stores are wide open, and the bosses and employees are welcoming you with the warmest smiles. This is why there are so many places to settle down, but Albert chose New York. This city is lively, energetic, hopeful and ambitious. Albert rarely came to restaurants before, because delicious food did not attract him much. If it was not to maintain his life, he would not even waste the little time eating. After becoming a foodie, he started to get cold from the food he ate. At the same time, he was surprised to find that the intake of delicious food helped replenish his energy. It's not the kind of energy that maintains body functions, but the kind of energy that enhances his body's super ability. Definitely, the food that can enhance his physical super ability is not ordinary food, but food from all over the world, extraordinary food. The Manhattan Restaurant is the largest food imported restaurant in New York and even America. Albert eats the food in this restaurant, which helps him evolve. In addition to food, He discovered that some rare metals can also help him evolve, such as vibranium, which is abundant in Veda. So now he has another side task: to collect vibranium to enhance his power. The global limited edition luxury car drove smoothly on the wide road. Elbert lowered the car window a little, and the gentle morning breeze blew on his face, which was pleasant and beautiful.